Last week, I presented at the Orange County GATE conference on using student choice in the 5E model, how to empower your students to take ownership of their learning. Now, that whole entire session was an hour long, but I realized that an hour-long video is way too long and teachers don't have time for that. So instead, I'm going to break it up into 5 videos, a 5-part mini-series. We're going to start with an overview of the 5E model, going over just basically what it's about and its purpose. Then we'll get into why student choice is important and how it can benefit our students. And finally, we'll go into 3 of the 5 phases and how you can infuse student choice into those 3 different phases. Hi, I'm Christy. I'm a middle school science teacher with over 25 years experience in the classroom, and I love helping teachers empower their students to take ownership of their learning. Let's go ahead and get started. In part 3 of our student choice in the 5E model mini-series, we're talking about now how to actually infuse student choice into the 5E model. So we've done an overview of the 5E model. We've talked about why student choice is important to offer your students. And now we're going to talk about how to infuse that student choice into the 5E model. Now, if you would like any of the resources that you are seeing here, I am going to put a link to the actual presentation, this PowerPoint presentation that you are seeing right now. I'm going to put that into the description, and that will then take you to links to all the resources that you will see in this video. They are there for you to use, enjoy, and save yourself some time. All right, so infusing student choice. To get started, you'll want to first make a list of all the activities and lessons that you are already doing, that you already have, or that you would like to use, but you never really have time for. You see, I've been teaching for 25 years. I have tons of lessons, tons of activities, way too many to actually teach in the time frame I have, which is why instead of me choosing the activities for the year, I allow my students to choose the activities they're going to be doing because I have way too many, and I give them the power of choosing what they would like to work on, what interests them instead. After you've got those activities, you'll want to identify the type of thinking involved. Again, this was originally for the Orange County GATE conference with gifted learners, where we use icons like depth and complexity icons, content imperative icons, or learning keys. So I would go ahead, if I'm using it for my gifted learners, I would think about which icons would go with them the best. However, I do student choice with my core students. And when I'm doing that with my core students, I'm still thinking about what type of thinking, which Bloom's level of thinking would go with each activity. Is this activity a compare and contrast? Is it a cause and effect? Is it an evaluate? Is it an analyze? What type of activity are they doing? Finally, decide if you can modify any of them to make them more inquiry-based. Could you take one of your labs that might be scripted, directions step by step, and make it more so the students come up with their own procedures? Could you take an online investigation and again, instead of having step by step with questions ready to go, could you give them a few questions and have them manipulate the online simulation and write down what they discovered? So where can you throw in more inquiry activities? There's 3 phases that work really well with infusing student choice. Explore, elaborate, and evaluate. And for this one, we're going to keep with explore. So we're going to start with the explore phase. How can you add student choice in the explore phase? Now, in the explore phase, that's a perfect time for science stations. I use the blended learning science station rotation model. Now, the original version of this is that there are 3 science stations, an online version, a group station, and a teacher-led. And the idea is that the students rotate through all 3 stations. It takes about 1 or 3 days depending on the activities they're doing. Usually I find in middle school, my students can get through 1 station a day because I do a setup, I do a closing, and it does take a while for us to review and remind my students about the expectations in a station rotation model, right? But the thing is, in a station rotation model, the teacher is deciding what those 3 stations are. They are deciding what is going to be the online, what is going to be the hands-on group station, and what is going to be the one that you're going to be doing with the teacher. Now, I love the station rotation model because I can work with, instead of 36 students all in one class, I can work with a pocket of 12 and really, really help those students. But it doesn't offer student choice. So how can we modify it? Well, what we can do is instead just stick with online inquiry investigations and hands-on inquiry investigations and offer more multiple choices for your online and for your hands-on. You can go through all your stuff and choose as many stations that you have based on the amount of activities you have and the days you can spend on it. So perhaps you have 1 day, you might offer 2 stations. That way they choose between the 2 of them. If you have 2 days, you might offer 3 or 4 stations. Again, they can choose maybe 2 stations to work on or 3 to work on. So you always want to have usually a few more stations than there is possible. Now, you could have it where the students get bonus points, extra credit, or however you want to do it, if they do decide to do all of the stations, for your students who like to extend themselves. But usually I like to offer at least 1 extra station than I really do have time for my students. You'll want to have that guiding question ready to go that they're going to answer. And again, for my gifted learners, I'd be using a couple depth and complexity icons or content imperatives. For my core students, I would have a guiding question. For example, we did a science station on atoms in the periodic table. We were just learning about atoms in the periodic table. And so my question was, how does the atomic structure influence the element's location on the periodic table? That was their guiding question as they did different activities for it. You'll also, when you have them doing these science stations, you'll want to have them fill out some type of note-taking guide or graphic organizer as they're going through the stations for them to organize their thoughts. So they're going to fill out the station information. You probably have a worksheet maybe they're filling out, or they're doing something for that particular station. But then you want to have a separate note-taking or graphic organizer where they can put their thoughts from all the stations they've done onto one paper to organize their thoughts from all the different stations. And that way they're all together in one spot. And again, you could have it where it includes these depth and complexity icons, or you could just have different questions that they're going to be answering, like breaking down. If you have the guiding question, breaking down some different spots, or you could just leave it blank and have them organize it their own ideas. You'll want to provide time for students to actually check in with other students doing the same science station. So if they choose a particular online investigation, allow them to work together, or if they are working individually, set the timer every 10, 15, 20 minutes, stop them, have them get together. What have you learned? What have you discovered? What is some information you found? What are your ideas on what you're learning so far? You want to have them talking. This is super important for all students, and especially your language learners who need to have that oral communication going. Some students have to think first before they speak. Other students actually have to speak in order to think. So we want to hit all those different modalities. Here is an example of the one I did with my advanced students, the ones that have my gifted learners in that class. We did 1.5 days, again, on atoms of the periodic table. The guiding question for them was, using details, patterns, and rules, explain how the atomic structure influences the organization of the elements on the periodic table. And they had 3 different stations: the PhET Build an Atom station, the Explore Learning Periodic Table Trends, and then an atomic structure worksheet where they looked at different atomic structures from elements in similar groups and also similar rows so they could get some information. Now, I do use these same worksheets with my core students, but I modify the types of questions I'm using with them. So I'm not really giving myself more work. We don't want to do that, right? It's just same activity, slightly modified for my advanced learners versus my core students. Now, during their science stations, they were filling out this graphic organizer, and I am monitoring the students' progress. I'm walking around, I'm checking in to make sure that they're filling in this note-taking template. I pause the class about every 15-20 minutes, and I'm reminding the students about the overall guiding question, because sometimes they get so lost in the activity, they're forgetting the purpose of the activity. So it's important to just remind the students why you are doing this activity, what learning you're supposed to be looking for, right? The students, I allow them to choose if they want to work individually, in pairs, or groups. I allow them the student choice that. They're completing the investigation, their note-taking template, and again, they're sharing their findings with other students. After the stations, I want the student to share their ideas, and they're doing that through a CER. They have their question. Their evidence are their details and their patterns. Patterns can also be in reasoning, and we talk about difference between when you would use the pattern in evidence or reasoning. And of course, their rules, since they're coming up with the rules themselves, that would also be in reasoning. So we are practicing, again, the claim, evidence, reasoning. I want them to draw their conclusion, which is their claim, but I want them to explain their thinking, how they came up with that claim, what evidence they use from the different science stations, and why that evidence helps support that claim. So at the end, I want you to think about now, you've got an action step for you. What are some activities or lessons that you have that you could then turn into a science station inquiry investigation? So now it's time to dig through all your stuff to figure out which ones would be benefit a science station inquiry investigation for student choice. If you need extra help with the 5E model, or you like more resources, head over to adventuresinISTEM.com/5E_resources for more information and more free stuff to help you implement the 5E model. Thank you for watching another Adventures in ISTEM and Beyond video. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more Adventures in ISTEM and Beyond videos. For more ideas on how to incorporate science, technology, and skills for life into your classroom, go to adventuresinISTEM.com.